Today we are talking about religious tolerance, and a combined concept is the idea of a secular state. It's a lot of developing countries, in particular in Sri Lanka, there is an idea that secularization should be the state principle. Now some of the political groups say that, the 1972 and 1978 constitutions, to rectify what happened during the colonial period, recognize that Buddhism is the foremost religion. And now the constitution says that Buddhism is the foremost religion, but also other minor religions are recognized. And now in the recent times, what happened is that political situation during the war, people have asking and demanding that this clause should be removed. And so the Buddhism should not be given the foremost place. And now, of course, people who suggest this has two assumptions. One, having this clause affect the national harmony and disharmony. That's their assumption. And the other thing is that they are thinking about American Constitution, and they think in the American Constitution the state and religion are separate. And so such a model is appropriate to Sri Lanka. So there's a second one. The third one, they also fail to recognize that even countries like Britain, which is to a great extent secular, still it has a state church. The Queen is the head of the state, and they fail to recognize it. And this is also true. So most of the Scandinavian countries like Norway, Denmark, and so on. So now these are good examples. Having a state religion in the case of the UK and Scandinavian countries doesn't mean that it undermines the minorities. It undermines the rights of the minorities. Now in the United States, where religion is separate, it doesn't mean that minorities are always happy or things are going better. So the proposing that Buddhism should be removed from the state should not be given the foremost place is a little bit problematic, because this country still has about 70% of the population. 70% of the population claim to be Buddhist, and it has a long history with nearly 2,500 years, 2,300 years history associated with Buddhism. And historically, inscriptions, like the 10th century inscription, says that none other than a bodhisattva will become a king. And 14th century Puja value says this land belonged to the Buddha himself. So now it's very clear in the history, throughout the history, Buddhist in this land has given prominence to Buddhism. So the Buddhism has inspired the state, Buddhism has inspired the culture, Buddhism has inspired and gave the inspiration for the people. So if we adopt in the Western models and proposing that Buddhism should be removed, what would be the option? What will be the situation of Buddhism? And what will be gained by excluding Buddhism from the state? I think we have to think carefully. And we have to think about what would be the majority people's feelings about this. When such a constitutional amendment is activated, what will be the majority Buddhist monks and the majority of the people will feel about it, and what will be the consequences of that. So I think this idea of secular state versus the religion. Now, of course, the Buddhism is not a state religion in Sri Lanka. Buddhism has been recognized for its historical importance as the foremost, but not the state religion, and all the other religions are recognized, and that's quite clear by appointing various ministries for the four prominent religions since 1990s. And so I think there are a lot of issues here to deal with, but actually they all are related with some notions of religious harmony, some notions of respect in the minorities, some notion of thinking that it can create a genuine reconciliation. But I don't think the disregarding Buddhism will be the solution for this, because Buddhism definitely is not a political ideology. Buddhism is not a racist ideology. Buddhism has enlightened principles, enlightened teachings. So having Buddhist principles as inspiration for governance would not undermine the right of the minorities, either ethnic or religion. So, the notion of secularity that most people propose should be introduced into Sri Lanka have to think twice. What will be the consequence for the culture? What will be the consequences for the people's way of life? What will be the implications for the morality of the average people? Now, what we see is that if we analyze Sri Lanka within the last few decades, the moral, in general, the moral conduct, the kind of adherence to moral principles has got weak. And so actually, in real fact, it's not the constitution, not the place of Buddhism at stake, that's not the issue. Actually, the problem is two different things. One problem is there's not enough economic development, not enough adequate job creation. There's not adequate opportunities for young people to flourish. That's important. Another thing is, even the resources that we have in our country, people are not they don't have the spiritual and moral qualities to consume them in a righteous manner. So the decline of the moral norms, disrespect for the law and order, actually taking away valuable resources from our country. So the moral decline in education, schools, in the administration is issue. So it is not the political recognition of Buddhism that actually causes a lot of problems in Sri Lanka, but our inability, our state inability, our people's inability to create a thriving economy, and also our religious and our leadership and people's schools and education system inability to create a generation that respect the law and order, the generation that generation that have self-esteem, a generation that want to think that we want to stand on our own feet, and we don't need anybody's charities, we don't need anybody's gift. We should be able to stand on our own thing, and we should do our best to our best ability. So the weakening of self-esteem, weakening of the morals, and weakening of the bonds in the community, these are the issues. So I think so this situation is quite complex. So secularity alone will not resolve the Sri Lankan problems. That's my kind of understanding. So secularity may be another way of westernizing our society, and also another way of giving up our tradition. So a country like Japan, what we can learn is how careful the people are to their tradition. In Japanese word, it's called dento. Dento means the tradition. So when it comes to anything, they will say it is our tradition. And so Japanese people are very modernized, but once you step in their front door, the whole world turns upside down. Inside the house is a tradition. So what happened to Sri Lanka is that we have lost our core, we have lost our roots, so the hospitality, gratitude, respect, and self-esteem, and kind of honesty, integrity, and we are losing those values. And so these are kind of creating an important gap in our country. So the heritage, culture, and the tradition is very important. So these are the identities. They are powerful identities than ethnic or religious identity. So I think these are some of the things that we have to think about when we think about genuine reconciliation. So removing the dominant, primary, the powerful religion from state, I don't think will be option, and adoption of the Western model will not be the solution. And so for long lasting peace, I think we have to be very careful how we deal with very important religious and philosophical tradition like Buddhism and its role in the development of the country.